Hey, what's up? This is Jamal Abbott here to talk to you today about telecom's breakup from media. This has been such an interesting development watching this transpire from the time that these telecom companies, and when I say telecom companies, we're talking about AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, from the time they started thinking about getting into media to where we're at right now, where they're completely separate from that reality. So, how do we get there? How do they get involved into this? And how do we get to this point where they're like, hey, we got bigger fish to fry and we want to do something a little bit more in our area of expertise? So, in this episode, you're going to hear more about that journey, and it's definitely interesting. So, looking forward to sharing this information with you. So we'll start first by profiling the individual companies, starting off first with T-Mobile, then the Verizon, then AT&T. We'll look at the different acquisitions that they took on, as well as what led them to splitting off from media altogether. So first, T-Mobile. So late 2017, T-Mobile announced an acquisition of Layer 3 TV to launch a disruptive TV service in 2018. That was delayed but launched in 2019 and called T-Vision. So this is a live TV and streaming service to take on the cable industry. So they were looking at a $100 billion industry, and they wanted a piece of that and to disrupt the players that were currently in the market, specifically the cable companies. In late 2020, T-Mobile looked at some reorganization of this particular product in the portfolio to add some additional varieties and content for that. And then finally, March of 2021, they abandoned this project altogether and now are partnering with YouTube and Philo for their live streaming TV service. Moving on to Verizon. Verizon, bigger deal as far as getting into media. They first started off by doing this with purchasing AOL for $4.4 billion in 2015. So within that AOL portfolio, that included items such as TechCrunch, Engadget, and the Huffington Post. In 2017, Verizon bought Yahoo, so that allowed them to get into more internet media, sports, and entertainment, and that was for $4.48 billion, once again in 2017. Once that deal took place, Verizon decided to combine the assets from AOL as well as the assets from Yahoo to combine and form this new business unit called Oath. And the purpose of Oath was to capitalize on the digital media and advertising front. In 2018, Oath rebranded as Verizon Media Group. And then we saw in 2020, Verizon selling off the Huffington Post in late 2020, as well as Verizon selling Verizon the Media Group, which included AOL and Yahoo, for $5 billion, and they're retaining a 10% stake in this new entity. So, wow, definitely a journey there for Verizon, and just amazing to see that transformation take place for that company. We're last going to look at AT&T. So AT&T, in my opinion, I thought had the best chance to be a media company. So a company that could capitalize on owning the content and then being able to attract consumers and keep them in their ecosystem based upon the assets they had acquired leading up to where we're at today. So back in 2014, they purchased DirecTV for $48.5 billion. DirecTV is a satellite TV service, if you're unfamiliar with that. In 2018, they purchased AppNexus, and this is an advertising platform. This allowed them to just get better understanding of consumer behavior, advertising, and things like that to get the right ads in front of users. In 2018, this was the big one. This is when AT&T purchased Time Warner for $85 billion. This was such a big deal. There was many um, organizations and even the government stepped in to try to prevent this transaction from happening. And basically, this usually happens when uh, there's concerns about competition in the market. So with this one, that one was finally closed and secured by AT&T, and T, and this started the formation of Warner Media. So Warner Media included assets such as CNN. Um, what am I missing here? So CNN, um, Warner Brothers, a bunch of TV channels like TNT, TBS, movies. So all sorts of content and assets that were within this portfolio for AT&T, and they controlled this all. And so anytime that there was a movie that was put out that fell under that Warner Media brand, that revenue came into AT&T's pocket. So once again, I thought that they had the best chance of transforming from just a traditional telecom company to an actual media company. And then with AT&T's vision, once again, they were going to be able to have you connected as far as live TV, music, and then having that cell phone connection. So that was the whole grand idea about this merger taking place. So in 2020, AT&T launched a live TV service. It's gone by a couple different names, but the idea with this was that this was a cloud-based service, and this would look to replace the DirecTV satellite product. And they were on the path of, in my opinion, being successful with that by getting those users off of that legacy platform and more of a software-based platform, which allowed less of personal hands-on and touch and setup compared to traditional satellite TV service. And then finally, one of the big things that came about Warner Media was the launch of HBO Max. So this is the direct-to-consumer streaming platform, which allowed the company to take on the competition, which was Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus. So all those types of competitors that were looking to get after the consumer's attention. And then, when I mention those things, there at that time when HBO Max was coming out, there was a lot of more activity with more streaming services coming to the market. The other idea too with HBO Max is that they would launch a ad-free version, which actually launched here in the last couple weeks, as well as look at possibly including some live TV. So this was supposed to be the platform that would combine all those elements together and to offer that over the internet. So what happened this year? And let me go back to say that HBO Max launched last year, and that was during the pandemic. And so fast forward to this year. February of 2021, we saw an announcement from AT&T, which they would say they would be selling off and or spinning off the assets for DirecTV, AT&T TV, and Uverse, which is their legacy TV service. That would be combined with this private equity firm called TPG and formed a new company called DirecTV. AT&T would retain a 70% stake in that entity, as well as TPG having the 30%. So that was getting TV off the balance sheet. And I thought that was a good move just to keep them focused, and that was the new direction for AT&T. May of 2021, which was just here recently, we looked at a deal where Warner Media and Discovery would combine together to form a new company, and then this would involve AT&T either spinning out or spinning off Warner Media altogether, and that would be a new company, and once again separate from AT&T. And the idea here was that AT&T wants to better focus on fiber and connectivity, which includes mobility and 5G. So a lot to say there, but you notice that there's some common themes. There was this move to go into media, to build up media assets, media relationships, and to take on the attention of the consumer at that time, which was on their mobile devices. So I got one of these right here. Capture the attention of the users who are looking on their mobile devices, who are already here looking at social media, who was already getting their updates. So why not be able to control the content that you see on this screen? I mean, it makes sense to me, right? So some common themes here, some observations that I see here is that the telco companies realized that they were better off partnering and working together with media companies versus actually owning and operating these companies all together. When they got into the business of being a media operator, that is completely different from operating a cell phone network or a telecom network. So just completely different business, completely different mindset and ideas. And I think that's what the challenge for some of these companies looking into media for the first time. The other thing that is something I briefly mentioned with this, something that was a big factor, I believe, in causing these companies to get out of media altogether, was the fact that there was the pandemic. So I believe if the pandemic did not take place, I think these companies would have stayed longer with trying to make telecom and media work together as a package deal. But probably one of the bigger affected parties with the pandemic was AT&T, and the fact that there was no movies being made really for the majority of 2020. So you still had to pay for film studios. You still had to try to figure out how to get movies out to the audiences that were slated to hit the theaters, and all that stuff costs money. Like that's just the bottom line. So one of the creative things I thought AT&T did during this time was to shorten the window, and actually almost not necessarily get rid of it, but shorten the window between when a movie comes to theaters and when it would be available to the home. And because of what was going on and being sheltered in place and couldn't be in certain confined spaces, they actually had some of their movies go directly to streaming services like HBO Max, as well as have a simultaneous release in theaters. So that model, I believe, is definitely a game changer, and we're still seeing evidence of that being popular. How popular will it be once we're opening back up? Time will tell, but that's something that they decided to do, and it worked out. But ultimately, I think the pandemic forced a lot of these companies to reevaluate what it meant to be in the media business and to think about focusing their dollars on areas that were better in their control and better in their area of expertise. Another thing to think about too with these deals, a lot of these deals were done in the mid 2010s. So roughly around 2015-ish is when these cell phone companies start to get into media. And then the other thing to consider as well too is that there is different leadership at the helms of these companies. So each of these CEOs and leaders of these companies that were ready to get into the media business, they're no longer controlling these companies at the present time. And the other thing that we're looking at now too is just the fact that 5G is here. It's something that they're all focused on, and I believe that's the main reason why they're ditching media altogether, partnering with specific players, but focusing all of their attention on the 5G opportunity, which has the potential to be more lucrative for them in the long run versus trying to understand and figure out an industry that they're not too familiar with. And then how important and how big is this 5G opportunity? You might be wondering. Well, we're looking at a global opportunity, and this is worth about $13 trillion worldwide. And that's going to include different jobs, sales, technologies, and just different industries that are going to come up because of this 5G opportunity ahead of these players. Specifically in the US, this is looking to add roughly $500 billion to the US GDP. And the other opinion that I have here on this is that for these companies to go down this 5G path instead of the media path, This is a more certain and clear area that they have more competency in, and therefore it's a clearer path for revenues versus being involved in media. So with media, that's a little bit more crowded, and there's no guarantee that you're actually going to be successful in that area with so many participants in the market. With the 5G opportunity, they're in clear control of that destiny, and it makes sense for them to not worry about something that they're not too good at and focus more so on what they're good at, which is upgrading networks, deploying these networks, and making sure that these consumers have the best possible experience. With that being said, those are my thoughts on the telecom breakup from media. I'm sad to see this happen this way, but they are definitely on the path to doing things right by focusing on this area. And it's not to say that they won't get involved in this at some point in time in the future, but at least for the present moment, they're focused on this 5G opportunity and not turning back and getting distracted with other things that aren't as important as that. So I appreciate your time and attention here today. If you have any thoughts or questions about this episode, I would love to hear your feedback. You have a couple different ways of hitting me up. The best way to reach me is by text, and that's 725-500-5132. Once again, 725-500-5132. You can also hit me up at Jamal Abbott on social media. Also, I have a website, jamalabbott.com, and you can leave me some feedback there. So once again, I really appreciate your time and attention here today and checking out this podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you soon.